Hello and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering EDH deck tech idea. Today we are taking a look at Jenova, Ancient Calamity. It is a 4 mana 1/5, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to Jenova's power on up to one target creature. That creature becomes a mutant in addition to its other types. It also has another triggered ability because whenever a mutant you control dies during your turn, you draw cards equal to its power. This Golgari deck focuses on +1/+1 counters and using Jenova's second triggered ability to draw a bunch of cards to simply generate so much value that we can overrun our opponents really quickly. As we are in Golgari colors, we can ramp in a very helpful and natural way, but there are a few ramp cards in this deck that are worth mentioning. For example, Biophagus, a 2 mana 1/3, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. If this mana is spent to cast a creature spell, that creature enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter. Biophagus is great in this deck because it can anthem up Jenova already, which can lead to her also antheming up creatures even more with more +1/+1 counters, and Biophagus can also be used to power up those creatures that we are going to cast afterwards, what makes it a really powerful card in this deck. As soon as we are in green, I prefer to ramp with instant and sorcery spells, which is why we play cards like Search for Tomorrow, a 3 mana sorcery, search a library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle. Remember that this land enters untapped, but you can also suspend this card with 2 time counters for 1 green mana. This suspend mechanic makes it a very powerful card in my opinion and makes it a great turn 1 play. As we are also on black, we play a bunch of removal, which is why the Darkness Crystal makes a great job in this deck. A 4 mana legendary artifact, and black spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Furthermore, if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile it and you gain 2 life. It also has an activated ability for 6 mana, and tapping it, put target creature card exiled with the Darkness Crystal onto the battlefield tapped under your control with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it. With this artifact we can make sure to never run out of creatures that we can sacrifice later on to draw even more cards, and it also helps us to accelerate into our game plan and stabilizes us by gaining life. We play the counterpart, the Earth Crystal, a 4 mana legendary artifact, and green spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Furthermore, if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are put on that creature instead. It also has an activated ability for 6 mana, you distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures you control. As we proactively have to sacrifice those creatures in our turn to draw even more profit from Jenova's triggered ability, we play cards like Flare of Cultivation, a 3 mana sorcery, and you may sacrifice a non-token green creature rather than pay the spell's mana cost. If you do so, search a library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, put 1 onto the battlefield tapped and the other 1 into your hand. Another really powerful creature that accelerates our game plan is Kami of Whispered Hopes, a 3 mana 1/1, and if 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a permanent you control, that many +1/+1 counters are put on that permanent instead. It also serves as a mana dog because you can tap it to add X mana of any one color, where X is Kami of Whispered Hope's power. Once we have accelerated into our game plan, we want to commit powerful creatures to the battlefield that can win us the game and also help with our game plan itself. For example, Aberrant, a 2 mana X/0/0 with Ravenous and Trample, and what is also worth mentioning is that it is a mutant by itself, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. So that we can recycle our graveyard, we play Evolution Witness, a 3 mana 2/1 with Adapt 2 for 2 mana, and whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on Evolution Witness, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand, and also worth mentioning is that she is a mutant. As we do have a +1/+1 counter theme, we also play Kodama of the West Tree, a 3 mana 3/3 with Reach, and modified creatures you control have Trample. Furthermore, whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player, search a library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped and then shuffle. Another really powerful mutant in this deck is Feral Ghoul, a 3 mana 2/2 with Menace, and whenever another creature you control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Feral Ghoul. Then, when it dies, each opponent gets a number of red counters equal to its power. We stick to Fallout cards that are also mutants. We play Screeching Scorchbeast, a 6 mana 5/5 with Flying and Menace, and whenever it attacks, each player gets 2 red counters. Furthermore, whenever 1 or more non-land cards are milled, you may create that many 2/2 black black zombie mutant creature tokens, do this only once each turn. And one of my favorite cards in this deck is Watchful Red Stack, a 3 mana 2/2 with Evolve, and whenever it evolves, create a token that's a copy of it. Aside from all of these helpful creatures, we also play powerful artifacts and enchantments that will help us to win the game. For example, Innkeeper's Talent, a 2 mana enchantment class, and on level 1, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. On level 2, you get some additional protection because permanents you control with counters on them have Ward 1. And the third chapter is really powerful because if you would put one or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. Another card that we also play from the Final Fantasy set is Fear Grid, a 2 mana enchantment, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. Furthermore, creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have Reach and Trample. Another really powerful turn 1 play in this deck is Hardened Scales, a 1 mana enchantment, and if one or more +1/+1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that many +1/+1/+1 counters are put on it instead. To be able to always make sure that we can sacrifice those creatures during our turn to draw even more cards, we play Altar of Dementia, a 2 mana artifact, and you can sacrifice a creature at any time, so target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of their library into their graveyard. For repeatable card advantage, we play Holomerk Siege, a 2 mana enchantment, and as it enters, choose Sultai or Abzan. If you choose Sultai, whenever a counter is put on a creature you control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn, which is definitely enough as we will do it every turn with Jenova on the battlefield. If you choose Abzan, whenever you attack, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature, it gains menace until end of turn. And last but not least, we also play Court of Garenbrick, a 3 mana enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. Then, at the beginning of your upkeep, distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among up to 2 target creatures. Then, if you're the monarch, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. You want to win more? You get it. We played the Orzhov, a 1 mana legendary artifact, and whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Orzhov. Then, at the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Orzhov has counters on it, you may move all counters from the Orzhov onto target creature. To accumulate counters really quickly, we also play Forgotten Ancient, a 4 mana 0/3, and whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Forgotten Ancient. Then, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from Forgotten Ancient onto other creatures. Another really cool card and also a mutant in its types is Hancock Ghoulish Mayor, a 3 mana 2/1, and each other creature you control that's a zombie or mutant gets +X/+X, where X is the number of counters on Hancock. It also has some inbuilt protection because it has Undying, so if it dies, if it had no counters on it, you return it to the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. And my favorite win con in this deck is Psychosis Crawler, a 5 mana XX, and its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your hand. Furthermore, whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. This can really quickly become your win con as you will accumulate a bunch of counters on creatures that you will then also sacrifice to draw even more cards, which will make Psychosis Crawler machine gun down your opponents really quickly. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I will play in Jenova, Ancient Calamity. Let me know which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next. Make sure to check out my full deck list in the notes below, and then I would say see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.